She had been standing at the altar for 14 minutes when she started counting the candles. That was what Vivienne Calloway did when she was afraid. Not cry. Not shake. Count. Keep the mind busy. Keep the mind from going somewhere it could not come back from. She counted 47 candles burning along the aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue, their light soft and golden and completely indifferent to the fact that her entire future was currently 14 minutes late. 400 guests filled the pews behind her. She could feel them the way you feel a storm coming, a low, collective pressure building at her back. The bridesmaids were still. Her mother, seated in the front row, wore a smile that had stopped reaching her eyes approximately 6 minutes ago. The priest stood with his hands folded and his expression carefully neutral, the way priests do when they have seen this before and know better than to say anything. Vivienne looked at the doors. She was wearing an ivory silk gown that had taken 3 months to make. Her hair was pinned with small white flowers. On her wrist was a thin silver bracelet with a crescent moon charm. Old, worn soft at the edges, the one piece of jewelry she had worn every day for 23 years, without ever fully explaining why. The doors opened, and Vivienne Calloway felt something lift inside her chest. Hope, automatic and embarrassing, and then watched it die in the space of a single breath. Daniel walked in. He was not alone. He walked in with a woman at his side, his hand resting on the small of her back in the particular way that belongs only to people who have touched each other in the dark. The woman was wearing a navy dress. Her lipstick was red. She looked like someone who had prepared for this moment. 400 people did not breathe. Daniel's eyes found Vivienne. He did not stop walking. He did not remove his hand from the woman's back. His expression was the worst possible kind. Not cruel, not panicked, but settled. The face of a man who had already made his decision and arrived here only to make it official. Vivienne stood still for exactly 3 seconds. Then she walked off the altar and began to run. What she did not know, what none of those 400 people watching her could have possibly imagined, was that the man she was about to collide with on the street outside had been carrying a ring with her name on it for 19 years, and that the worst morning of her life was about to become something else entirely. She ran in her wedding dress down Fifth Avenue with no shoes on. She had kicked them off somewhere on the cathedral steps, 2 ivory heels that cost more than most people's rent, and she did not go back for them. The pavement was cold through her silk stockings. October in New York had no interest in being gentle, and the wind came at her like it had been waiting all morning, lifting the hem of her gown and pulling strands of her hair loose from their pins one by one. People stared. Of course they stared. A woman in a wedding dress running barefoot down Fifth Avenue on a Thursday morning is not something the city ignores, even a city that has agreed by collective contract to mind its own business. A delivery man on a bicycle slowed down. A group of tourists raised their phones. A doorman took a step forward as if to ask if she needed help, then thought better of it. Vivienne did not stop. Here is what was happening inside her as she ran. The rational part of her mind, the part that had managed a $3.2 billion private equity firm since she was 26, the part that had survived an 8-month legal war with her stepfamily and never flinched once, that part was completely offline. What was running her body instead was something older and simpler and more honest than any decision she had ever made in a boardroom. Something that just needed to move. She was not thinking about Daniel. She was not thinking about the guests or the caterers or the reception venue or the flowers that would have to be returned. She was thinking about nothing. That hollow, clean, terrifying nothing that fills you when the future you planned has just been deleted, and the space where it used to be has not yet been filled with anything else. She was not crying. She noticed this the way you notice something mildly surprising from a distance. Her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set. Her lungs burned and her feet were going numb, and she felt, above all else, that specific hollowness. The sound a life makes when it empties out without warning. She turned off Fifth Avenue, then another street, then one more. She was somewhere near Park Avenue now, the glass towers thinning out, the morning light cutting between buildings in long, sharp angles. She turned one final corner and ran directly into a man in a wheelchair. The collision happened fast and completely. Vivienne's shoulder caught the handle of the wheelchair. Her momentum spun her sideways, and for one long, weightless second, she was going down. Her hands reaching for nothing, the pavement rising toward her, the white silk of her gown spreading around her like a broken wing. Then a hand caught her arm. Not a tentative grab, a firm, certain grip. Fingers closing around her forearm with the kind of steady authority that comes from someone who decided to catch her before she even started falling. She jerked to a stop. Her knees bent but held. She did not hit the ground. She looked up. The man in the wheelchair was approximately her age, perhaps a few years older. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, the top button of his white shirt open. His shoulders were broad. His jaw was sharp and slightly unshaved. His eyes were very dark, the kind of dark that absorbs light rather than reflecting it. And they were looking at her right now with an expression she could not immediately name. It was not surprise. It was not the polite alarm of a stranger who had nearly been knocked over. It was something much quieter and much more unsettling than either of those things. It was recognition. "I'm sorry," Vivienne said. "I wasn't watching where I was going." The man did not respond. His eyes moved, slowly, deliberately, from her face down to her hand, where she had braced herself against the arm of his wheelchair. Then they moved further, to her wrist, to the silver bracelet, to the small crescent moon charm worn soft from 23 years of being touched. Something happened in his face then. Not large, not dramatic, just a shift. The way a room changes when someone opens a window. The same space, the same walls, but the air entirely different. His grip on her arm had not loosened. If anything, it had tightened. He looked back up at her face, and Vivienne felt a cold move through her that had nothing to do with the October air and nothing to do with the barefoot run across 3 blocks of Manhattan. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was quiet and controlled and sounded like a man using every available unit of composure to ask a very simple question. And Vivienne, who had outrun one disaster that morning already, understood instinctively that the answer to that question was going to start something she was not ready for. She told him anyway. The man in the wheelchair closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Not dramatic, just 2 seconds of complete stillness, like someone confirming a calculation they had been running for a very long time. Then he opened them and looked at her with an expression she would think about for weeks without being able to fully name it. "Vivienne Calloway," he said. Not a question. Her full name on his tongue like something memorized and kept. "Yes," she said slowly. "Do I know you?" He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, not for the pen she had noticed clipped there. For something smaller. A box, dark velvet, the size of a ring box, worn at the corners as though it had been carried for a long time. He held it out and opened it. Inside was a ring. Not a diamond, not anything from a jewelry store. It was a thin silver band with a small crescent moon engraved on the face, and the engraving was identical in every detail to the charm on the bracelet on Vivienne's wrist. She stopped breathing. "My name is Nathan Hargrove," he said. "We were 9 and 6 years old the last time we saw each other. You were leaving the Queensbridge Children's Home on a February morning. You didn't say goodbye because you didn't know you were going. I watched the car take you away from the second-floor window." He paused. "Just one beat. I made that ring 3 weeks later from silver wire I found in the maintenance shed. I've carried it for 19 years because I told myself that if I ever found you again, I wasn't going to spend another 19 years thinking about what I should have said." Vivienne stood on that sidewalk in her wedding dress with no shoes on and looked at the ring and then at the man and then at the ring again. "You can say no," Nathan said. "I recognize this is an unusual situation. You appear to have just come from somewhere difficult. I am sitting in a wheelchair on a public sidewalk holding a ring I made when I was a child. There are many reasonable objections." He held her gaze steady. "But I have been looking for you for a long time, Vivienne, and I am asking." The wind moved between the buildings. A taxi horn sounded on Park Avenue. The city went on around them, enormous and entirely indifferent. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "What did they call you?" "At the home." "When you were little?" He was quiet for one beat. "Nate," he said. And something in Vivienne's chest broke open like a window that had been painted shut for 23 years. She did not say yes. She also did not say no. What she said, after standing on that sidewalk in the October cold for a full silent minute, was, "I need to sit down somewhere warm." Nathan Hargrove, who had spent 19 years rehearsing the moment he found her and had not prepared for this particular response, said, "There's a cafe 2 blocks east. I know the owner." And that was how Vivienne Calloway ended up sitting across a small corner table from a man she had not seen in 23 years, still wearing her wedding dress, her feet slowly warming on the heated floor, while a barista named Marco pretended professionally that nothing unusual was happening. Nathan ordered an Americano. She ordered chamomile tea because her hands were shaking slightly, and she did not want coffee to make them shake more. He noticed the shaking. He did not mention it. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. A Joni Mitchell song played low through old speakers. Outside, Manhattan continued at its usual pace, unhurried by anyone's personal catastrophe. "You're Nathan Hargrove," Vivienne finally said. "The Nathan Hargrove. I assume you mean the one from the financial news and not some other Nathan Hargrove of equal notoriety. CEO of Hargrove Acquisitions, 43 completed deals, nicknamed the Glacier on Wall Street." She looked at him steadily. "You've been trying to acquire the Calloway Foundation for 6 months." A pause. Something moved behind his dark eyes. Not guilt exactly. More like a man recalibrating. "Yes," he said. "That's my foundation," Vivienne said. Another pause. Longer. "I know," he said. "I found out this morning, before I left my office. That's actually why I was outside that building when you ran into me. I just told my team to close the file." Vivienne looked at him. "You closed it before or after you saw me?" "Before," he said simply. "By 40 minutes. She held his gaze. Something in his expression was patient and open in a way that did not match the profile she had studied. The glacier did not look like a glacier up close. He looked like a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had quietly decided to set it down. Tell me about the boy at the home, she said. Tell me what you remember. And here is the thing about Nathan Hargrove that no one on Wall Street knew. He remembered everything. He told her in the careful, even voice of someone who has stored memories so precisely that retrieving them feels almost structural, like pulling a file from a cabinet that has never been disorganized. He told her about the Queensbridge Children's Home in Queens, a 4-story brick building near the river that smelled like industrial soap and cafeteria bread, and something beneath both that he had never been able to name. He told her about arriving there at age 6 after his mother died, a second-grade teacher who caught pneumonia in February and was gone by March. The kind of loss that adults spoke about in soft voices and he absorbed in silence. He told her about the older boys, 3 of them, ages 9 and 10, who had decided that the small, quiet new kid was available for the particular cruelty that children practice when no one is watching. Nothing that leaves marks, the kind that doesn't show. He had been 9 years old. He had been alone. And a 6-year-old girl with a silver bracelet had decided that was not acceptable. He told her about the afternoon in the East Courtyard, when he was backed against the brick wall with nowhere to go, and a girl came around the corner. Small, dark-haired, quick on her feet, wearing a bracelet that caught the October light. She assessed the situation in approximately 1 second. Then she planted herself between Nathan and the 3 older boys and said with the composure of someone twice her age, "If you touch him, you're touching me first. And I will tell every adult in this building exactly what I saw." She was 6 years old. The boys left. Nathan had looked at the girl and not known what to say. She apparently did not need him to say anything. She sat down on the ground beside him where he had slid against the wall, pulled a loose end of silver wire from her bracelet, and began winding it between her fingers. They sat there until the dinner bell rang. She never told him her full name that day. Just Vivi. He did not ask for more. She left 3 months later on a February morning, gone before he woke up. He made the ring that weekend from wire he found in the shed. It had seemed necessary at the time. He had not stopped thinking it was necessary since. Vivienne sat with her tea growing cold and listened to every single word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I remember your eyes. They were the same then." Nathan Hargrove, who had not been genuinely surprised by anything in more than a decade, looked at his coffee cup and found he did not trust himself to respond. Outside the cafe window, October rain had begun to fall quietly on Manhattan, the way it does when the city decides the moment is serious enough to be witnessed. She did not go home that afternoon. She called Rachel, her best friend and chief bridesmaid, who had been sending increasingly frantic texts since the moment Vivienne pushed through the cathedral doors, and said 3 sentences. "I'm okay. I'm not coming back to the church. I'll explain later." Then she turned her phone face down on the cafe table and looked at the man across from her. "You need to explain the wheelchair," she said. He had expected this. 8 months ago, car accident on the BQE Black Ice, a truck that lost control, a split second of physics I had no influence over. His voice was factual, not seeking sympathy. "Spinal injury is incomplete, which means recovery is possible. It's progressing. Slowly." He paused. "I'm told patience is required. I'm not naturally patient." "You waited 19 years to return a ring," Vivienne said. Something that was almost a smile moved at the corner of his mouth. "That is a fair point." "The wheelchair," she continued. "Is that why your board is meeting next week? To decide if you're still fit to run the company?" He looked at her evenly. You've done research. I do research on everyone who circles my foundation for 6 months. You're not the first person to try to find out who owns it. He was quiet. And what had you decided to do about me? Before today? I hadn't decided yet, she said. I was still measuring. Outside, the October afternoon had gone gray. The cafe had filled around them with the lunch crowd, and Marco had begun treating them with the practiced invisibility of someone who had correctly identified that this was not his business. I have a proposal, Nathan said. Not the ring, a different one. She waited. My board responds to perception as much as performance. They're considering replacing me while I recover. If I appear at next week's session with a stable personal life, a partner, it changes the narrative significantly. He looked at her directly. Stand beside me 1 week. In exchange, I sign whatever documentation you require to permanently remove Hargrove Acquisitions from any interest in the Callaway Foundation. She looked at him for a long time. You are very strange, she said. Yes, he agreed. She picked up her tea. 1 week. You tell me everything about the board meeting in advance. No surprises. Agreed. And you stop trying to acquire things that aren't for sale. Also agreed. She nodded once. And outside the window, New York City went on, entirely unaware that 2 people who had last seen each other in a courtyard 23 years ago had just made an arrangement that had absolutely no chance of staying as simple as either of them intended. The first public appearance was a Tuesday evening reception at the Park Hyatt on 57th Street. Vivienne wore a dress the color of deep water, a rich teal that moved when she walked, and her amber-orange coat over it, which she kept on through the cocktail hour because October had made clear it was not interested in being reasonable. She stood beside Nathan's wheelchair with the natural ease of someone who had never once in her life needed to prove she belonged in a room, which was precisely the quality that made people in expensive suits keep glancing at her and then at each other trying to figure out who she was. Nathan made the introductions. He was precise and brief. This is Vivienne Callaway, financial consultant, close friend. And Vivienne extended her hand and asked the exact right questions, because she had been reading the bios of every person in this room before Nathan had even sent her the guest list. She knew the heavy-set man near the bar named Gerald Fitch was Hargrove's CFO and the primary skeptic on the board. She knew the woman in the burgundy blazer was Helen Park, general counsel, whose body language suggested she was watching Nathan for signs of weakness rather than failure. She knew the young man trailing Gerald was his son-in-law, recently promoted, which told her exactly where Gerald's loyalty was anchored. She filed all of this away and said nothing that revealed she had filed any of it. When Gerald approached with his practiced smile, she engaged him on the firm's European expansion with specific knowledge that made him pause and visibly recalibrate who he was talking to. When Helen Park drifted over, Vivienne turned the conversation to a legal case she knew Helen had worked 3 years earlier and asked a question that changed Helen's posture from assessing to genuinely engaged. Nathan watched all of this from his wheelchair without saying anything. Later in the car, he said, "You just did something in there." "I had conversations," Vivienne said. "You rearranged 3 people's opinions of me without any of them knowing it happened." She looked out at the Manhattan night. "You needed it done, so I did it." He was quiet for the rest of the ride. But when the car stopped at her brownstone and she opened the door to get out, he said her name once, just her name, and she turned. "Thank you," he said. She nodded and went inside and stood in her hallway with her hand pressed flat against the door. Not entirely sure what she was feeling, which was, for Vivienne Calloway, an unusual enough experience to be worth paying attention to. The second appearance was a Friday lunch at a private dining room on the 44th floor of the Hargrove Tower. 8 members of the board. A long mahogany table. The kind of room designed specifically to make a person feel that power lives here, and they are either part of it or they are not. Nathan sat at the head of the table with Vivienne to his right, and from the moment they walked in, she understood that this room was not a luncheon. It was a hearing, and Nathan was the one on trial. The first 40 minutes went smoothly. Nathan presented a recovery timeline, a Q3 report, a restructuring proposal for the European division. His voice was even. His numbers were exact. If you did not know what to look for, you would have said he was fine. Vivienne knew what to look for. She watched his left hand under the table and counted the times he pressed it flat against his knee. 4 times in the first 40 minutes, which told her exactly what this performance was costing him. She said nothing. She simply remained completely steady and completely present, which was its own kind of signal to every person in that room who was watching to see if she was real. Gerald Fitch leaned forward at minute 42. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, in the voice of a man who has practiced his sentence. "Given the circumstances of the past 8 months, we need to discuss the question of long-term capacity. Your doctor's most recent report suggests another 4 to 6 months before full mobility assessment. The firm cannot operate in uncertainty that long." The room tightened. Nathan opened his mouth. Vivienne spoke first, not loudly, not interrupting exactly, more like continuing a thought that had been left incomplete. "Gerald," she said pleasantly, "I'd be curious what metrics the board is using to define capacity, because from where I sit, and I've reviewed Nathan's last 3 quarters in some detail, what I see is a firm that posted a 12% growth increase in the same period that its CEO was managing a medical recovery. If that's the floor, I'd genuinely like to see what the ceiling looks like." Gerald blinked. Helen Park looked down at her portfolio. Vivienne thought she might be hiding a smile. Nathan looked at Vivienne with an expression she had not seen before. Not gratitude exactly. Something quieter. The look of a person who has been carrying a room alone for a long time and has just unexpectedly felt someone else take a corner of the weight. In the elevator afterward, he said nothing. When the doors opened at the lobby, she turned and said, "You were about to concede something in there." "Yes," he said. "Don't," she said, and walked out into the October afternoon. The text from Nathan arrived 11 minutes later. It said only, "I noticed." 3 days later, Vivienne's phone lit up with a name she had not expected. Jasper Cole, her attorney, her closest friend, and the person who was about to tell her something that changed everything she thought she understood about the situation she was walking into. Jasper Cole arrived at her brownstone on a Sunday morning with 2 coffees and an expression she had learned to read over 11 years of friendship, the one he wore when he was about to be honest at some cost to the conversation. He set a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations on the kitchen table beside the coffees, which was his tell the same way her face-down phone was hers. "You've been seen publicly with Nathan Hargrove 4 times in 9 days, Jasper said. "Financial press is asking questions. Your stepmother's attorney called my office on Friday, and you are looking at your phone differently." "I am not looking at my phone differently. Viv, you check it and then set it face down instead of leaving it face up. You've done it 6 times since I sat down, and I've been here 11 minutes. She looked at the phone. It was face down. "He's interesting," she said. He's the boy from the home, Jasper said quietly. She looked up. You told me about him once, years ago. A small boy in an East courtyard. You said you thought about him sometimes and wondered if he turned out okay. He held her gaze. He turned out to be Nathan Hargrove, which requires some processing. But here is what I need to say to you. He still doesn't know who you really are. He knows you as a consultant. He knows the foundation is yours. He does not know the full picture, and he is going to find out. The only question is whether it comes from you or from a document. He picked up the Aurelius and turned it in his hands, the way he always did when he was choosing his words carefully. You know what Aurelius says? The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. You have been standing in your own way for 6 years, Vivienne. She was quiet for a long moment. Through the kitchen window, the garden had gone gold and amber with late October. Her favorite season, the one where the city finally showed what it was made of beneath all the performance. He proposed to me on a sidewalk, she said softly. He had carried that ring for 19 years. I know, Jasper said. What kind of man does that? Jasper was quiet. The kind that does not forget, he said. Which means he is also the kind that does not forget when he has been misled. She picked up her phone. She looked at it. Then she set it face down again. Jasper drank his coffee and said nothing else. But before he left, she noticed he had opened the Aurelius to a page and left it on the table. She did not look at it until he was gone. Then she looked. Book 4. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And Vivienne Calloway sat alone in her kitchen with the October garden outside and understood that the armor she had built to protect herself had somewhere along the way become the thing she was hiding behind. Diana Voss arrived in Vivienne's life the way she always did, without announcement, already several moves ahead, wearing something impeccably designed to make the room recalibrate. She appeared at a small cafe on Madison Avenue on a Wednesday morning and was already seated when Vivienne walked in, a flat white in front of her, a tablet open, an expression that carried the particular quality of a woman who has been watching and has decided she is now ready to speak. Diana had been Vivienne's college roommate at Penn, her closest friend for 4 years, her business rival for 6, and the only person outside Jasper who knew Vivienne's full financial identity. He knows more than you've told him, Diana said, before Vivienne had fully sat down. Not everything, but his due diligence team has been asking around. They found someone who knew you adjacent to a deal 2 years ago. He's 2 conversations away. She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a name Vivienne recognized. Vivienne looked at it, looked up. Why are you telling me this? Diana set down her flat white with a precise click. Because I owe you honesty about something. 6 weeks ago, before the wedding, before any of this, Nathan's team reached out to me. They were looking for someone who knew you at Penn. I didn't give them your identity directly, but I told them you were worth understanding. I pointed a flashlight in your direction. She paused. I thought I was helping. I thought if they understood the foundation's value, they'd stop the acquisition angle and approach differently. I may have accelerated everything that happened instead. Vivienne looked at her steadily. You didn't name me directly. No, but I pointed a very good flashlight. A silence settled between them, long and complicated. The weight of a friendship that had grown in separate directions and was now trying to find each other again on the other side. Diana, Vivienne said finally, why are you telling me now? Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Vivienne did not expect. Because I have watched Nathan Hargrove for 2 weeks, and he is not behaving like a man who wants your portfolio. He is behaving like a man who found something he lost and is trying very carefully not to break it again. She picked up her flat white. Don't make him find the rest of it by accident, Vivienne. Don't let the armor be the thing that costs you this one. She stood, pulled on her coat, and walked out. Vivienne sat alone with her coffee and felt the last 2 weeks arrange themselves differently in her mind. The way a picture changes when you finally have all the pieces in front of you and the shape of the thing becomes clear. The Central Park morning happened 6 days into the 1-week arrangement. Vivienne ran the reservoir loop at 6:15 every morning, early enough that the path was almost empty, late enough that the October light had begun to do extraordinary things to the Manhattan skyline through the tree line. She came around the north curve and found Nathan there. He was not running. He was moving along the outer path in his wheelchair at a steady pace, a thermos on his knee, dressed in dark athletic clothes, his breath making small white clouds in the cold. He did not look up until she was almost beside him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Just two people who had apparently decided to spend their early morning at the same reservoir in the same park at the same hour, which was either coincidence or something neither of them was quite ready to name. They moved along the path together in silence. The skyline appeared through the tree line in sections. The towers of the Upper West Side, the distant reach of Midtown, the whole improbable vertical ambition of this city laid out against a pale October sky. "Tell me something true," Nathan said, without looking at her. Vivienne ran a few steps before answering. "My father died on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting across from him at breakfast," she said. "I had just poured his coffee. It was still steaming." She paused. "I never drink coffee at breakfast anymore. I have tea." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My mother taught second grade in Queens for 31 years, he said. She used to say that the children who couldn't read by spring were the ones she thought about for the rest of her life. That's the real reason I started circling your foundation." He glanced at her. "I thought it was a business opportunity. I was wrong about what kind of value it had." She looked at the city through the trees. "What is it actually?" she asked. "A promise someone kept," he said, "for children who needed it kept for them." They finished the loop in a silence that was not uncomfortable. When they slowed at the park entrance, Vivienne turned to look at him. Just for a moment, unguarded, the early light on her face, the crescent moon bracelet catching the cold October sun. "Come see the foundation," she said. "Tuesday. I want you to see what it actually does." He said yes before she had finished the sentence. And Vivienne understood, walking home alone through the October streets in her running shoes, that the 1-week arrangement had already become something she was not going to be able to fold up and put away when the week was done. The foundation visit changed something that could not be unchanged. Vivienne watched Nathan move through the Callaway Foundation programming floors on a Tuesday morning, and what she saw was not a man calculating value. It was not the performance of someone who had agreed to be impressed. He stopped at the second-grade classroom where 14 children were working through a reading exercise with a teacher named Ms. Patterson. He asked to stay for 10 minutes. He stayed for 25. Ms. Patterson, who had not been told who Nathan Hargrove was, treated him the way she treated every visitor, with warm authority and no special performance. When a boy named Marcus struggled with a word on the page and looked up in frustration, Nathan leaned forward slightly and said quietly, "Take it apart. What's the first sound?" Marcus sounded it out. Got it. And the expression on the boy's face was the particular expression of a child who has just discovered something he can do. Vivienne watched Nathan watch that expression. She watched his jaw move slightly, the way it does when something catches in the throat before the face has time to compose itself. She understood in that moment exactly what he was thinking about. A boy in a brick building near the river in Queens who had also needed someone to say, "Take it apart. You can do this." They had lunch afterward in a small conference room. Sandwiches and coffee in plain mugs. They talked about the programs, about the 300,000 children the foundation had served across 15 years and 5 boroughs. And then Vivienne said, "I need to tell you something." Nathan looked at her. "My name is not just Vivienne Calloway, financial consultant," she said. "That's true, but it's incomplete. Calloway Capital, the private equity firm, is mine. Full ownership, the trust, the shares, everything. The foundation is the smallest part of it." She held his gaze. "I've been giving you the true version and not the full version. I know that distinction may not feel like much of a distinction." He was still. "I didn't do it to deceive you," she said. "I did it because I have spent 6 years not allowing anyone the full picture until I was certain about them. It became a habit. And then it became the thing I was protecting instead of the thing that needed protecting." She paused. "You took 25 minutes to help a 7-year-old sound out a difficult word. I decided that was enough evidence." Nathan looked at her for a long time. "How much?" he said. "I'm sorry." "The full picture. How much?" "Approximately 3.2 billion, she said. "Give or take the quarter." The silence that followed was 3 seconds exactly. Then Nathan said, "You are substantially richer than I am." "Yes," she said. "And you were testing me," he said. "Yes," she said again. "I was." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she had not expected. "Tell me what I did right," she told him. Not everything at once. She told him the sequence. The way he had closed the acquisition file before he ever saw her on that sidewalk. The way he had not pretended in the cafe that the recognition was anything other than what it was. The way he had watched Marcus sound out a difficult word and stayed 25 minutes longer than he said he would. The way he had, in every interaction over 14 days, said the true thing instead of the convenient thing. "That's the whole list," she said. He looked at her steadily. "I grew up with nothing," he said. "I know the difference between value and worth. I learned it young, in a building that smelled like industrial soap and cafeteria bread." He paused. "I never needed your portfolio, Vivienne. I needed to know if the girl who stood in front of those boys in the courtyard was still in there." "She is," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "I could tell by the bracelet." And in the conference room of the Calloway Foundation, with plain coffee mugs between them and the whole of New York City outside the window, going about its enormous, indifferent business, something settled between them. Not perfectly, not without complication, but genuinely. The way things settle when two people have finally said the true thing and chosen to stay in the room. What happened next? Nobody planned. That evening, Daniel called. Vivienne was standing in her kitchen when his name appeared on her screen. She looked at it for one full ring cycle. Then she answered. He was not apologetic. He was practical. He wanted to manage the situation. He had spoken to a publicist. He thought they should issue a joint statement. Something about a mutual decision, amicable, no hard feelings. He used the word narrative 3 times in 4 minutes. He said the photos from the cathedral were circulating, and he was concerned about perception. Vivienne stood in her kitchen and listened to all of it. Then she said, "No. Vivienne, no joint statement, no narrative management. You walked into a church with another woman on what was supposed to be our wedding day. 400 people watched. That is what happened. I am not going to participate in softening it." She hung up. She stood with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she put it on the counter, and this time, deliberately, consciously, she left it face up. The donor event was held in the main programming hall of the foundation on a Thursday evening. No mahogany tables, no leather portfolios, no people measuring each other's net worth through the quality of their cufflinks. The annual winter reception was filled with the people who actually funded these programs. Teachers who had redirected personal inheritances, retired executives who had turned late-life guilt into productive infrastructure, anonymous donors who attended every year and never put their names on anything, real people in good coats rather than designer ones, who had come because they believed in something rather than because they needed to be seen believing in it. Nathan came at 7, on the dot. He moved through the room in the quiet, observant way Vivienne had come to recognize as his natural setting, not performing social ease, just actually paying attention. She watched him from across the room for 5 minutes before he found her. He stopped beside a wall of student essays, third graders, pencil on lined paper, the handwriting large and earnest, and she watched him read them. Not scan them, read them one by one. She crossed the room. "Favorites?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. He pointed to one without hesitating. A drawing below an essay, a child's crayon rendition of a library, the shelves enormous and detailed, the books in every color. The essay title in careful block letters, "The Place Where I Am Not Afraid." Vivienne looked at it for a long moment. "Every year," she said quietly, "there is one that breaks me a little. This year, that's the one." Nathan looked at her. The room moved around them, warm and full of conversation, and they stood at the edge of it in a small circle of quiet. "You built this," he said. "You built every room the children in those essays have ever walked into and felt safe." "My father started it," she said. "You kept it," he said. "For 15 years. Anonymously. Without credit. That's not inheritance. That's a decision made over and over." She looked at the drawing, the library, the enormous shelves, the books in every color, the careful block letters spelling out "The place where I am not afraid." She reached out and took his hand. He did not look surprised. He simply closed his fingers around hers the way you close your hand around something you have been waiting for and are not going to drop. They stood at the wall of children's drawings with their fingers interlaced, in a room full of people who believed in something, and Vivienne Calloway thought, "This is what it feels like to be seen. Not your portfolio, not your family name, not the armor, you." It felt exactly like the library in the drawing, like the place where she was not afraid. The article broke on a Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Tom Archer at the Financial Times. 8 months of research, 3 layers of source confirmation. The most careful paper trail Vivienne's anonymous architecture had ever faced. By 8 a.m., it had been shared 40,000 times. By 9, her phone showed 62 missed calls. Vivienne read it in the garden. She had put on her orange coat and taken her chamomile tea outside into the cold November garden and sat in the small iron chair by the rose bushes. Bare now, just thorned stems against the brick. And read the article twice from beginning to end. the way her father had taught her to read difficult things, completely, without flinching, once more from the start to make sure she had understood it. The piece was fair. Tom Archer had been thorough but not cruel. He wrote about the Foundation's scope with genuine understanding. He wrote about her deliberate anonymity as a choice born from experience rather than arrogance. He wrote that Vivienne Calloway was, by any measure, one of the most significant private philanthropists in New York history, operating with a discretion that had protected the Foundation's integrity for 15 years. He mentioned Nathan Hargrove briefly, that Hargrove Acquisitions had circled the Foundation and subsequently withdrawn its interest, and that Nathan had been seen publicly with Vivienne on 4 occasions. He was tactful. He was accurate. He left the conclusion to the reader. Her phone buzzed. Nathan, not a call, a text. It said, "I'm outside, can I come in?" She unlocked the front door from the garden without moving from her chair. He came through the house and found her outside exactly as she was. Orange coat, tea in both hands, the November garden around her doing nothing in particular. He navigated the garden path and parked beside her and looked at her face. "How are you?" he asked. She considered the question seriously. "Lighter," she said, "which surprises me. I thought it would feel like losing something." She looked at the bare rose stems. "It feels like the thing I was carrying to protect myself turned out to be heavier than what it was protecting." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want to say something. Before this becomes a public conversation, I am not here because of $3.2 billion. I am not here because of the Foundation or the portfolio or any document my team produced." He looked at her directly. "I am here because you stood in a courtyard when you were 6 years old and made yourself into a wall between me and something I could not handle alone. And because the woman you became is the most extraordinary person I have encountered in my adult life." He paused. "And I have been paying close attention." She looked at him. "I know," she said softly. "You always say that," he said. "Because it's always true," she said. And she put her hand in his, and they sat in the November garden while the city made its enormous noise around the brownstone walls, and 62 missed calls went unanswered, and neither of them felt any urgency about that at all. Daniel's version of events appeared online 3 days later. Not a formal interview, something more damaging. A series of posts from people in his circle, each adding a detail, assembling a portrait of Vivienne as calculating, cold, deliberately deceptive. The word manipulation appeared in 4 separate posts. The implication, carefully distributed across multiple sources so no single person bore full responsibility, was that Vivienne had hidden her wealth to control the people around her. That Daniel had been a victim of her withholding. That Nathan Hargrove, by extension, should consider carefully who he was standing beside. Nathan read all of it on a Friday morning at his desk on the 44th floor. He did not call his publicist. He did not call his communications team. He did not draft a statement or consult a strategist. He picked up his phone and called one person, Jasper Cole. Jasper had been expecting this call. He answered on the second ring. "I need to understand something," Nathan said. "Not about the business. About her." "Ask," Jasper said. "She tested me," Nathan said. "For weeks. She watched and measured and kept information from me because she needed to know who I was before she trusted me with it. I understand why. I'm not asking you to defend it." He paused. "What I want to know is whether that was done to me or for herself." Jasper was quiet for a moment. "Both," he said finally. If I'm being honest with you, and I think you deserve honesty more than comfort, it was both. She built walls that were originally for protection and became, over time, the thing she hid behind. She knows this. She has told me this. Another pause. But I will also tell you, the woman who stood on that sidewalk in a wedding dress and heard what you said and did not walk away, that woman has been trying to come through the door for a long time. You are the first person who made her want to come through it. Nathan was quiet. The people posting those things about her, Jasper continued. They knew the consultant, the version she showed them. You know something different. Think about what you know. After the call, Nathan sat at his desk for a long time. Then he did something he had not anticipated doing. He called a journalist he had known for years and trusted to be precise. He said he had a brief statement to make on the record about Vivienne Calloway. The journalist asked if he was sure. Vivienne Calloway is one of the most honest people I've ever met, Nathan said. The honesty is simply not always convenient or immediately visible. Those are different things. He gave nothing else. The quote ran the next morning. By afternoon, Daniel's posts had gone quiet. The board meeting was on a Monday. Nathan had told Vivienne she did not need to come. He said it clearly, without expectation, not managing her response, just telling her the true thing and leaving the choice with her. She came anyway, not into the room. She sat in the waiting area outside the 44th floor boardroom with a coffee in a plain ceramic mug borrowed from Nathan's assistant Clara, and she read, not her phone, not briefing documents, but a novel she had brought deliberately. The kind of reading that signals to the room around you that you are entirely at ease. Clara brought her a second coffee at the 90-minute mark. Said nothing. Vivienne thought Clara knew everything about everything in this building and kept it all with extraordinary discretion. The board meeting ran 2 hours and 17 minutes. When the door opened, Nathan came through first. He looked at her across the waiting area, and his expression told her before he said a word. Full confidence vote, he said. 7-1. Gerald abstained, which is Gerald's way of conceding without conceding. And Helen Park? She asked. Helen voted with me. She told me afterward that she had been undecided until the lunch where you mentioned her case from 3 years ago. She said, and I am quoting, anyone who reads people that well deserves to be in the room. Vivienne smiled. The real one? The small, unguarded one she had stopped performing and started simply allowing. I read briefings, she said. That's all. You read people, he said. The briefings are secondary. He came toward her, navigating the chairs with the ease that had been returning incrementally over weeks, the recovery progressing slowly but without reversal. He stopped beside her and looked at her with the expression she had learned to stop trying to translate and had started simply receiving. I want to ask you something, he said. She waited. The ring, he said. The one I made when I was 9. I've been carrying it for 19 years, and I made you an offer on a sidewalk in October that wasn't entirely fair given the circumstances. He paused. I'd like to ask again, properly, with everything on the table and no uncertainty about what I'm asking. She looked at him. Outside the 44th floor window, Manhattan was doing what Manhattan does in November, gray and cold and relentless and magnificent, the skyline going silver in the afternoon light. You already know my answer, she said. I want to hear it, he said. Not because I doubt it. Because some things deserve to be said out loud. She took a breath. Yes, she said. Nathan, yes. 3 weeks passed. Vivienne announced the full ownership of Callaway Capital and Callaway Foundation through a formal statement that Jasper drafted, and she rewrote 3 times until it sounded like her actual voice, rather than a legal document. The response was significant and swift, and mostly the thing she had feared for 6 years, which was that people would see the money and stop seeing her. But something unexpected happened alongside that. Letters arrived at the foundation, not emails, actual letters, from teachers in the 5 boroughs who had used the foundation's resources for years without knowing who was behind them. From parents of children who had learned to read in the foundation's classrooms. From former students who were now in college and wanted to say thank you to whoever had cared enough to keep the lights on. Vivienne read every one of them at the kitchen table with her chamomile tea. Some of them she read twice. Jasper came by on a Wednesday morning, as he always did, and found her at the table with the letters spread around her and her eyes red at the edges. He sat down. He did not say anything. He put his worn copy of the Meditations on the table between them and opened it to a page he had bookmarked and pushed it toward her. She looked at it. Book 9. Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. She looked up at him. I thought it was going to feel like losing, she said. I know, he said. Does it? She thought about the letters. About the boy named Marcus who sounded out a difficult word. About Nathan standing at the wall of children's drawings with his fingers around hers. About the crescent moon bracelet on her wrist, and the ring that matched it now on her finger. No, she said. It feels like the opposite of that. Jasper nodded. He closed the Meditations and tucked it back into his coat pocket where it always lived. He stood and put on his jacket and picked up his coffee to go. At the kitchen door, he stopped. He's good for you, Jasper said, simply, without any other weight behind it. I know, Vivienne said. He smiled, small, genuine, the smile of a man who has carried something for a long time and has quietly set it down. And he walked out into the November morning. Vivienne sat at the kitchen table with the letters around her. Outside, the first real cold of the season had arrived in New York, the kind that settles in for months and makes the city strip itself back down to what it actually is. She could see her breath on the window glass. She thought it was the most beautiful thing she had seen in a long time. Winter came to New York the way it always does. One morning you step outside and the city has made its decision. The cold is no longer a suggestion, and everything becomes quieter and more honest in the particular way of seasons that strip things back to their structure. Vivienne stood at the window of the founder's room on the morning of the first real snowfall, watching it come down over the city, soft and purposeful, covering the streets and rooftops and the bare trees of Central Park in something patient and white. The room behind her was exactly as her father had left it, books floor to ceiling, his desk with his photograph on it, the chair where she had spent more hours than she could count learning to run a company she had spent 6 years pretending not to own. Nathan came in at 8:15 with 2 coffees, plain ceramic mugs from the corner place. Not the expensive kind, the honest kind, which tasted better anyway, which she had told him once and which he had remembered, which was exactly the kind of thing he did that made all the other things make sense. He set the mugs on the desk and moved to stand beside her at the window. She could see the snow coming down over the reservoir where they had run together in October, over the cathedral where she had stood in an ivory dress counting candles, over the block on Park Avenue where she had run into a wheelchair at full speed in a wedding dress with no shoes, and the rest of her life had rearranged itself around a ring made of silver wire. "Your father would have loved the snow," Nathan said. "He would have stood exactly here," she said, "and told me the city looks honest in winter." "Does it?" She looked out at the white covering everything, the noise and the hustle and the performance and the pretense, all of it gone quiet under 2 inches of snow. "Yes," she said. "It does." He put his arm around her. She leaned into him slightly. On her wrist, the old silver bracelet with the crescent moon charm rested against the new silver ring on her finger. 2 pieces of the same story, worn soft by time. Finally, in the same place. She thought about the boy in the brick building by the river who made that ring from wire he found in a shed. She thought about the girl who had stood between him and something he could not face alone. She thought about 23 years of separate lives and the specific impossible morning in October when she ran out of a church in a wedding dress and the city decided it was finished waiting. She thought about Jasper and his meditations and the quiet, enormous cost of love given without condition. About Diana and her flashlight and her 2-page handwritten apology. About Ms. Patterson and Marcus and the face of a child discovering what he could do. About her father's coffee, still steaming on a Tuesday morning in February, the last thing she had ever poured for him. She understood, in the way understanding sometimes comes, not in a moment of drama, but in the quiet of a winter morning with someone who stayed, that every hard thing had been the path. Not the detour, the path itself, the obstacle and the way. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked. She looked out at the snow. "That the city looks the way I feel," she said, quiet and very clear. He tightened his arm around her. The snow came down over Manhattan, patient and white, covering everything with the particular mercy of winters that ask nothing except that you be still long enough to let them. And Vivienne Calloway, who had spent 6 years making herself invisible and 19 years carrying a story she did not know how to finish, stood at the window with the man who had waited without knowing he was waiting. And felt, for the first time in longer than she could honestly say, entirely, completely herself. If this story reached something in you, if the boy in that courtyard made you feel something you were not expecting, or if Vivienne's long walk back to herself felt familiar, please leave a comment. Tell us the moment that hit hardest. These stories exist because you show up for them. Every view, every share, every comment is what makes it possible to keep telling them. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. And if you know someone standing at a door they are afraid to walk through, share this with them. You might be the reason they finally do. We will see you in the next story. This story is a work of fiction created purely for entertainment and emotional storytelling purposes. All characters, names, places, events, and situations depicted in this narrative, including Vivienne Calloway, Nathan Hargrove, and all supporting characters, are entirely fictional and the product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or actual events is entirely coincidental and unintentional. The locations mentioned, including St. Patrick's Cathedral, Central Park, and Park Avenue, are used as fictional settings only and do not represent the views or endorsement of any institution or organization associated with those places. This channel produces original dramatic fiction in audio storytelling format. Our stories are designed to entertain, inspire emotional reflection, and celebrate the human experience through the power of narrative. We do not claim these events are real, and viewers should engage with this content as they would any work of creative fiction.